And we are live. Okay. Welcome, Michael, and thanks for being on Job Talks with HR, a podcast for recruiters where they share their advice to candidates and to help them get a career and help them get jobs. And biggest of all, if they have been stuck somewhere, they can be used and they can use your advice and tips to get ahead in their career. Thank you for joining on the podcast. Michael, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, first, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you reaching out to me and asking me to join. So I am Michael Brinn. Currently, I am the director of talent acquisition for a two companies. Basically, one is Carbon 60, which is the holding company, the master company, and then we have OpsGuru. So it is technically one company, but we still kind of operate under two brands. There is a difference in the services provided. So I have over 10 years overall in talent acquisition or recruiting, whatever you want to call it. Started out as a basic full desk agency recruiter and just progressed and worked my way up throughout my career at some different companies and to now where I'm leading a practice for scaling a company.
You worked your way completely from bottom to the top of corporate ladder. How was your journey?
It was is tough. It's tough. So what what some people don't realize is, especially for me when I started out, one, there was no work from home. So I worked in Philadelphia and would have to drive or take the train into work every day. Why I'm saying that is because the days were long. You're looking at 6, 7 a.m. in the office, leaving the office 6, 7 o'clock at night, and you're responsible for everything. You're responsible for sourcing clients to try to find business. You're responsible for contacting those clients, developing your own business, which is open positions for clients, finding candidates, placing them, closing them, etc. So the first 4 years of my career was difficult, but it was amazing because I learned so much, and I wouldn't even be close to the type of recruiter that I am right now if I didn't work for this company and get trained the way I did and learned, on the job, so to speak. So um, I was fortunate throughout my career that I found some really good places to work and work with a lot of really good people. Um, the somewhat of a drawback, you might say, is a lot of companies that I've worked at since I left the agency have been small companies that didn't have a foundation in place for talent acquisition. So I was starting that myself, which was great. It's a great learning experience, but it's a little bit more difficult because you don't have a whole lot to learn from, meaning either peers, professionals, systems in place, etc. So you're kind of doing everything ad hoc, and which provides a great learning experience, but it also increases a little bit of the difficulty while you're doing it. So um, I worked my way up, and it's been great, but it definitely wasn't easy.
Hmm. Indeed, when you are starting your career as a first professional, you have to learn multiple things on the go. It is never spoon fed, or your job is never defined of one particular scenario.
Correct. You are. It's definitely the opposite of being spoon fed. You're right there because what happens is this is for the company that I work. So in agency recruiting, there's a couple different types of models. The company that I work for, we were considered full desk recruiters, meaning you had to, as I explained, develop your own business. You basically start and they say, okay, we'll train you and we'll teach you how to do certain things, but you start from scratch. You have to create your own business. You have to find open positions. You have to fill those open positions. You have to do all that on your own. You're not given clients. Now, most recruiting agencies, or like just you can say like the typical scenario is you have people that are responsible for the sales portion, right? The account management, which is, creating business with clients. And then you also had the other side of the house, which are the recruiters, people who just solely recruit candidates for positions. My position was all grouped into one. So I was responsible for both ends. And you don't get clients just for nothing. You have to get that on your own. So it was a process that was difficult, and but all in all, it was good.
Amazing how your story turned out to be. You just started as a at the desk, and now you are a director in a big company of OpsGuru.
Yeah.
Curious to know what is the next 5 year vision of OpsGuru?
So that is definitely to be determined. If you follow kind of the trajectory that most companies similar to OpsGuru have done, it would be to scale, grow, and then essentially sell. A lot of times, OpsGuru is a specialized consulting company regarding cloud initiatives for clients. So when you think of any client in any industry, any company, any industry, if they have any sort of public cloud initiative, whether it would be migrating from maybe an on-prem to AWS or Azure, GCP, etc., maybe it's just an application modernization. Maybe there is an IoT angle to an application. They would, there's the options and the scenarios are endless, right? But every company right now is doing that. Everybody's still moving over to the cloud, and that business isn't going away. So what happens is a lot of these really, really large organizations will eventually buy a smaller specialized partner, so that way they can add those service offerings to the portfolio. For example, OpsGuru is my third cloud consulting company that I've worked for. Previously, the two that I've worked for were the scenario that I just laid out. Started out real small. I might have joined a company when they were around 100 people, give or take. And within a couple of years, we grew to 300, 400 personnel. We get acquired by a much larger corporation. The first time it was Hitachi Vantara, and then the second time was Rackspace bought the company that I worked for. So if you look at the history, and now I'm at the same thing that I was previously, the two positions. Right now we're, a couple hundred people, give or take. We are growing. We have aggressive hiring goals. And if I had to guess, I would say the exit strategy is most likely to sell. However, that's just my pure speculation. That's never been told to me. I think that the board and the CEOs, they would tell you that they don't even know really what they expect the next 5 years. What I can tell you for definite is extreme growth. If we are still operating individually in 5 years from now, we are going to have at least, if I had to guess, I'd say at least 800 more employees. So we'll be over the 1,000 employee mark if we're still in business there. And it's really just adopting any new service or cloud type of work that's going to be done, because everything changes. We will be at the forefront of that.
Interesting. How cloud and OpsGuru are working together to build the future of next 5 years. I have an interesting question of this is the question that I get mostly from every candidate in my entire entire podcasting time. What is the hardest part a recruiter feels? What is the hardest part about recruiting?
Oh, I don't know if I can give it a very specific thing, as in my opinion, it's much larger when it comes to my recruiting, where the hardest part for me is not so much competition per se, but it's competition with the same exact type of skill set. So what I mean by that is we are hiring cloud professionals, cloud engineers, cloud architects. You can software engineers, software architects, but they're still cloud focused. So there's a specific type of serverless architecture, AWS services to go along with hands-on coding, right? So you go, okay, that's what we're recruiting for. We know we're going to have competition. It's just because of everybody going down that cloud path, the skill set that is required is like the same. So it's like anywhere you look now, if anybody's hiring for a software engineer, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be with a similar stack and a similar requirement. So the hardest part is one, beating the competition, but more so getting candidates interested in your position because there are so many options out there. When I joined a company called Rain Cloud about 6 years ago, that was my first cloud consulting company I joined. And not many organizations were doing what we were doing. So the appeal was glamorous, right? Everybody was like, I want to go there. No companies are working on the type of automation that you guys are doing. At that time, Terraform wasn't even really like a thing. People were moving from Chef Puppet into Ansible and then into CloudFormation and Terraform. So we were like at the very beginning of that. So it was an easy sell. It was like, hey, you come here and you can work with Terraform. You can do this. We're going to be doing AWS. People weren't working with AWS. Fast forward 6 years to the present day now, and it's everywhere. It's everybody. So telling somebody, well, this is what you're going to be doing, well, they can say, well, yeah, sure. So is the other 100 people that contacted me. So it's trying to capture their attention and get them interested in, okay, this is why our position's a little bit different, or this is what our company is doing, the projects, etc. It's increased in difficulty over time because now it's so mainstream.
Competition previously was, the entry barrier was high. Now, as everyone is doing, the entry barrier is low and the market is saturated or crowded, as you can say. That
Yeah,
is the toughest part of recruiting currently.
I think so. Yeah. You can also talk about um, compensation trends. The money and the salaries and compensation is always changing, but within the last year and a half, we saw some drastic changes. So then it comes down to one, how competitive can your organization be compared to other, right? So when I talk to a candidate and they say, well, this company is offering me, this type of salary. And I say, well, yeah, I mean, we can't do that because we are, a couple hundred people. The company that you're talking about is 15 people. So they have a little bit more, flexibility with how much they can pay certain engineers. They don't have the growth goals that we do. So keeping up with compensation is really difficult as well. That's part of recruiting that I've noticed some affecting, right, your success as a recruiter, is how can we be competitive when it comes to the compensation. So you can use that as another angle when it comes to what's really the difficulty.
Speaking of salary, what would you advise a youngster who is just starting about negotiating salary when he is on the table?
So I tell people that it's important when you're going into the final stages, the offer negotiation phase, whatever you want to call it, that you need to identify your number that you are 100% confident and comfortable with signing an offer letter. And you need to go, okay, like in your head, this is where I'm at. And you can shoot high and you might get more, etc. But it's a really important to know, because a lot of times people don't know that, right? They know what they're making, they know what they want. But sometimes people say, let's say, for example, in the United States, you have an engineer who is making 120,000 a year, and they're interviewing for some jobs, and the question for compensation comes up, and their response, they don't really know, right? They don't want to overshoot and get rejected because of it. They don't want to undersell themselves, right? Undercut themselves and get less. So it's important where you say, okay, this is what I know. If I get an offer with this number, I'm going to accept. And you have to be able to factor everything in, which is why you have to go through the process and get your questions answered, really find out what's important for you in that position. Because there's going to be companies and there's going to be jobs that people interview where they will, let's say, want more money than other jobs, right? You can be happy about a job, you can like it, and you can say, yeah, like I can work here, I want to accept an offer. But, you're like, it's not, you're not jumping through the roof to be like, I want this. Where then there's other positions where you might feel that way. So what you would take money wise is different, and you have to be able to know that. I always tell people, be as realistic as possible. A lot of times candidates don't want to answer the question, or they don't know how to answer it because they're afraid of the reasons I said. And I said, like, it's okay to be honest. You know what you want, you know what you need from money. And if you're going to, let's say, try for more than what you are happy with, that's fine. That's okay. Just make sure that it's somewhat realistic. And I think that that's the best approach for somebody to take to getting that type of compensation that they truly want.
In summary, it could be deemed as do your research, as everyone would say, do your research before you enter the salary negotiation.
I would say do your research, but also too, you have to look internally in yourself and know what you're going to be happy with and what you want. I think candidates don't do that enough, where they get to that offer phase and they don't know. They're like, oh, I have an offer, and it's not as much as I really wanted, or the recruiter is talking to me about getting an offer and their questions. So leading into that, exactly what you said, right? Do your research to where you are 100% comfortable, where you can say, hey, give me an offer with this and I'm good and I'll sign.
This is a sound advice that every candidate should follow. Speaking of this recruiting part, how would you advise a candidate to take a job? Should they aim for a career or should they aim for a job? How would that transition go?
Can you repeat that? The second part you said aim for. I didn't hear that.
Aim for a career or aim for a job? How would that go? How should a candidate go for that?
Yeah, that's a tough question, because it's going to be a lot of times it could get determined by the personal situation, right? Like, I think we all want money, we all need money, we have bills to pay, and sometimes we're if somebody's in a position where they can't really be too picky, then it's, yeah, you got to get a job to pay the bills. I understand that, but I think what's important for overall career growth is to aim for a job that is going to put you in the best scenario to have the best career you possibly can get. And I can elaborate on that a little bit, because this was something that I would experience when I first started recruiting at the recruiting agency, where I would talk with a lot of candidates and they might get jobs coming out of school or at a junior level that pay them really well. And they would say to me, well, right now, I'm making this amount of money. And I would say, wow, like that's pretty good. Or they would say, I'm coming out of college and this company here, they're offering whatever money, like 100K right out of college. And it's like, wow, that's great. But you have to make sure that you look at what you're going to be doing, and also, even more importantly, what you're going to be learning, because you can get that entry level job or that junior job that pays you above market, and you can be happy, you can make money. But then in 5 years, you haven't really picked up any new skills. And that technology that you're using is outdated. And now there's really no market for you, because your skills aren't that applicable. And without those skills, the compensation won't match. So yeah, you got paid great for those 5 years, but now there's nowhere to go and there's nowhere to grow. So if you're looking at a job where it's like, yeah, this pay isn't exactly what I want, but this is what I can learn. So that way in 5 years, I'm going to be able to get that much more money because I've grown. And I would see that when I was at the recruiting agency, but then also too, when I first came to cloud services and started working there, I would tell that to candidates. They might be, let's say, a network security engineer or like a sysadmin at a company, where they're doing some things and they're senior level, so they're making good money, and they don't have the most applicable skills for us, but they have some where we can hire them. We want to hire them, but we can't pay them what they're looking for because they don't have those skills to match. Mainly, let's say cloud skills, right? AWS services, or automation, CI/CD tools, etc. And I would tell them, listen, I get we're not going to be able to pay you what you're looking for, but if you look at it where you're going to, in 5 years, you're going to be a cloud expert, and you're going to have all these tools that you don't currently have, you're going to be able to use here, and you're going to be able to learn that here. So in 5 years, if for whatever reason you want to look for a new job, or even 3 years, you're going to double what you're currently making, or currently looking for, because then one, you'll have that necessary skill set, but then two, that necessary skill set is going to be in such demand that the market's going to be so much more valuable for you. And that would be something where you approach it and you aim for, okay, what's going to be best for my career, not just looking for a job.
Mm, yeah, that is the advice which everyone should be listening. I'll put that thing on repeat on the podcast. I'll highlight it as important point as well when this goes live. You should look for a job in a depth, in a deep manner. I get your point. At the start, you might get the pay. At the end of 5 years, you might have still the pay, yet not the skills. You need to balance those both things when you're starting your career. I get your point.
No, absolutely. And it's tough because it's money, and we have bills, as I mentioned, and we have lives, and I get it where you need to make a certain amount of money to live, and sometimes we're not in a scenario where we can take less money to learn. But I think that it's still really, really, really important that when somebody's looking at a job, they look at, okay, what am I going to learn, and what's going to be my position in 5 years. And you can also look at internal growth. For example, you join a company as a software engineer. What do you want to do in your career? Do you want to work your way into management? Do you want to work your way into a different path when it comes to maybe like architecture? And you make up your mind, or at least you have an idea. And does that company, does the position you're going to be in, does that enable you to hit those goals for the future? Does your company have, that you're interviewing with, do they have um, a documented, let's say, track record of internal growth, where people have joined the company as a software engineer and now they are lead engineers or engineering managers at this company? So you can see, okay, that's really good growth potential. Or it's, for example, the company that I work for, OpsGuru, we have two paths that technical people can go down. Not everybody wants to be in a people management type of position. So, and a lot of times that's really the only way you can grow in your career. So we design two paths where, one, somebody can follow that management path, but then also two, if somebody wants to stay more hands-on, more technical, not people management, they can still work their way up and continue to grow into either lead architects, principal architects, practice manager architects, those sort of types of roles, where they're continuing to grow and they're doing what they love to do and be hands on. So if you are interviewing and you can see that, that will help you tremendously when it comes to aiming for your career and not just a job.
The depth of insight that you gave right now is in it itself a great thing for a candidate to understand where they should put their energy towards. Should they put their energy towards the job, or should they put their energy towards the 5 year next thing that they are looking for? Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
As Michael, I have a question for you. As a young recruiter, when you were at Rain Cloud or when you were starting at Philadelphia? How did you hire or how did you spot great talents?
Huh. So that is 100% developed through experience and trial and error and learning, right? So one of the good things and benefits, or one of the things that I benefited from working at the company Motion Recruitment that I did, was that we were very specialized recruiters, meaning when you join the company, you start out on a team that has a very niche area of focus, meaning I was solely recruiting software engineers with specific programming language skill sets: Java, open source, mobile, C, C++, etc. And that was it. Those were the only positions that I would recruit for. So that enabled me to be able to get a little bit more specialized and identify talent easier, or let's say more efficiently, than a lot of other recruiters, because now I'm an expert. Now you can say, well, yeah, but if we gave you a network admin position to recruit for, you wouldn't be able to do that. Yes, that's true at that time, but what happens is you create and you develop the skill set of picking through resumes and identifying the true valuable experience in a resume by being specialized. So then that could emulate and you can replicate that for whatever position gives you. So that way, when somebody gives you a position, you already know what are the main areas of a resume to look at, how to pick it out. To be completely blunt, you become an expert at, you know, looking at bullshit, and you can say, yep, that's not really accurate, or I can tell they made their experience sound a lot better than what it probably is. And that's what separates, I think, really, really good recruiters from not so good recruiters. Is I can look at a resume and, success rate of probably 90% or higher, be able to tell right away, okay, will this person pass my recruiter screen or not? And when you're able to do that as a recruiter, it's great because it saves you time and you become much more efficient, that you don't have to screen every application or every candidate that sends you the resume. So that's kind of one way of how I learned and what you go through. But to go, kind of back to your question of how, and it's asking questions. It's really, I would have so many in-depth conversations with engineers that I was recruiting with and talking with, that I would want to be almost as technical as I possibly can without actually being a technical person. And when you're able to do that and you learn much more about the skill sets, the technologies, the services, when you have a conversation with somebody, let's say somebody applies, the resume looks great. It's got all the buzzwords, it's got everything on there that you want. But then when you have a conversation with them, or her, that okay, they're not very realistic or accurate, right? What they're saying. They have those words on there, but they didn't really do what they're saying they did, or it's a very, very high level. And if you can pick through that, and how I became, a self-proclaimed expert, is just through repetition. And it's just, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of resumes and recruiter screens that I've done throughout my career. And that is finding, okay, how is this person delivering their answers? You know, is there hesitation? Do they keep it very vague when they're explaining what they did and how they used it? And you're okay, well, that didn't go too well. They're probably, I don't want to say lying, but they're probably not telling the whole truth. And I think that through repetitions and just years of experience and listening and asking questions rather than just, the basic, recruiter screens sometimes are, some recruiters, it's the very basic questions they ask, right? It's, what interests you? Where do you see yourself in a few years? What do you like to do? Do you have experience with X, Y, Z, etc.? And I take my screens to a different level just so I can accurately identify the talent, and that's diving into what they're doing. And I can do that because I've learned so much about the technology that I'm asking for or their requirements in any position, doing some research beforehand. So I think that that's a really helpful way for a recruiter to be able to do that.
There were 3 points or three basic pillars that I saw you. First was sitting with your team and having a deep conversation of what exactly do they want. Second was brute force repetition. You just brute forced your way in of scanning multiple resumes, seeing through what a person is speaking, and just knowing by the time when he hits your table, okay, this person is having something in his resume, yet is just a hollow person. He's not speaking the right things. He doesn't know the right words. He doesn't have the right kind of technical knowledge or in-depth knowledge. So so these three pillars were completely combined with trial and error. As you said, it was just trial and error, continuous thousands, hundreds of resumes going back and forth. Over time, you just understood, okay, this is how I would see a person.
Yeah,
In
and
that way, yeah, go on.
no, I was gonna say if I was just thinking now of an example, for what I would do in a recruiter screen years ago, when the services technology wasn't exactly the same as it is now, in configuration management, right? So if we're going to be looking for a cloud engineer, DevOps engineer, they're going to be doing some sort of usage of configuration management. At least back then they were. So I would ask candidates a lot of times, tell me about your experience with configuration management. And if they couldn't answer that question because they didn't really know what it was, then to me that was a red flag. Okay, they probably aren't using Ansible or Chef Puppet that we're looking for. Because a lot of times candidates will say, "Well, what do you mean? Can you give me an example?" And it's, well, if you give them examples, then they can just say, "Yeah, that's what I used." So I would leave it to them, and I wouldn't, because a lot of times they would say, "Well, what do you mean?" And I'll say, "Well, whatever you think you use for, or whatever you use for configuration management." And if they couldn't answer that question, then to me it's like, okay, they're probably not going to be. So that was a way that I could really quickly identify off the bat how legit is this candidate.
Yeah, you can say that because of one big thing, you technically know what you want before you are screening a candidate. You
Right.
just are not sitting just with a buzzwords of, okay, this person should check five of this checkbox and he is in. No, you really know what is happening. How are you connecting the dots? For example, as you said, Java, open source, C++, how are they connecting with each other? What is the back end happening? What is the SQL happening at the back end? How are they connecting the database? Is it MongoDB or something else? How are they working together? How are they raising a virtual machine or something of that sort?
Mm-hmm.
You really know the stuff at the back, and that's why you know how to scan them quickly. Isn't that right?
100%. And and again, that's something where, like, obviously self-proclaimed, but um, I've always tried my best to learn and know as much as I possibly can about the technical skills and the services. And even if it's not a tech position, even if it is, let's say, a sales role, right? If we're, let's say I'm recruiting an enterprise sales executive and I'm talking to the hiring manager and we're going through the job description, we're going through, okay, I dive into a deeper level and layer of their questions where it's like, okay, I want somebody that has experience, enterprise level selling these types of services. Well, there's more to it. You can always dive in more. It's like, okay, at what level, doing what, doing this, and that can be replicated for any position. And I think if you have that foundation as a recruiter, that will really, really be able to help you identify talent more efficiently than if you don't have those questions. Because as you mentioned, then you're really just going through check boxes of buzzwords, and too many too many recruiters out there rely on that, and it hurts them in the back end because it delays time of finding hires and hiring people because they're not really skilled enough to be hired. But you could have identified that in the beginning, but you didn't because you didn't dive into it a little bit deeper.
This was the part of recruiters. Coming on to the candidates again, what do you see are the biggest mistake a candidate makes often?
Through now, do you mean in just at any part of the interview process?
Let's take an example of final recruiting part or the initial part. We were in the final part. Let's go to the initial part of building your resume. As we know, first impression is the last. How would you define your resume? How would you pick up a candidate's resume and say, okay, this candidate, he is going to sit at me with this table right now?
So I think it's important to, you know, describe as in depth as you possibly can with what you're doing. Now, I'm talking just for kind of conversation, let's say like technical roles, right? Software engineers, whatever. It is explaining one, what you are using, but just as importantly, what you're doing with it. Because everybody's going to have a resume that looks like a shopping list, right? When you go to a grocery store, you have a shopping list, you have all these items you want to get. Well, sometimes resumes look like that, where it's skills that they list, right? Terraform, and then or if you want to do cloud, right? They'll list every single AWS service that they've used or have saw exposure to, etc. And to be able to list what you're using, but really important to show what you're doing with that. Maybe you just give it insight into an application that you built. What did the application do? What were the services? You wrote Node on the back end and you created an API to connect to and talk to something else. And you use this for the database and it was built on serverless architecture. Even if you did maybe light React on the front end, or if you were just completely all back end, to outline that a little bit. So I think that if you can articulate what you're using and also how you're using it, I think that's really the best way to show a recruiter or hiring manager, whoever's looking at your resume, that you're qualified based on this is exactly what you did, rather than just listing technologies that you used.
That's a fair advice. Uh, I would like to have one final thing from you that would be your biggest advice for a candidate who is just starting his career and getting his first job. Think of it as a person who knows nothing and he has just entered the employment field and he wants to enter in and get a job. What would be your advice? And that is my final question.
Whew, I would tell this person to try their best to look forward in the future and try to identify what you really, really want to do. Okay. What is your essentially your end goal? If you're a technical person, do you want to be a CTO? Or even if you don't want to go that far, it's what do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to use? And try to, once you have that in mind, now you can look at each position as, okay, does this position put me in a place where I can achieve that goal of becoming this a lead architect using this, or becoming a sales manager, or becoming a CISO, right? Whatever it is, because too many people, I think, get into a position and either one, they have to change their trajectory, or two, they get really pushed back behind the eight ball with achieving those goals because they took a job that didn't really enable them or give them the ability to achieve those goals. And I think that hurts a lot of people in their careers, in all industries, types of roles, etc. So anybody who's going into the job market, I said, okay, what do you want to do? Right? Like, what are you interested in? What do you want to do? Where are you going to be passionate about? If you can find a job that you are truly, truly passionate about, that is three-quarters of the battle of having a successful career. So you find something that you're really happy with as far as what you're going to be doing. Does this job provide that? And then two, does this job provide you the foundation to build on for achieving your career and progressing throughout your career, where you don't have to completely do a 180 and completely change your experience. You want to be able to keep that experience. So I think that that's really the most important part when you're getting into like your first job. And I can tell you that it's a hell of a lot easier said than done. For example, myself, when I was first looking for a job, I would have had no answer for you if you would have asked me those questions. If you would have said, where do you see yourself in 5 years as far as what type of job do you want? I had no idea. All I knew was the job that I was interviewing for seemed pretty cool. I was interested in it. And then after I got that job, got some experience, then I could start to look forward to the future. Okay, this is what I really would want to do. I really want to get into, a management, leading a team and coaching and training, etc. So that way, whenever I would look for other jobs or if anybody approached me about another job, I could look at it, high level and say, okay, does this job help me achieve my goals that I have? And if it didn't, then it wasn't going to be the right place for me. So it's a lot easier said than done. It's easier as you start to get some experience, then you really know. But if you want to look at it just from an entry level type of first job market, you're hitting the job. It's what do you want to do? Are you able to identify what you want to do at the culminating position of your career? So that way, whatever job you're going to be looking at, you can look at it. Does it help me achieve that or not?
Okay, that is something that every candidate should look forward to, because if they are starting a career and they can look forward in the next 5 years and say, I want to be in this field even if the job is paying me less. That is how they should be looking.
Yeah,
Isn't,
a
yeah,
hundred
that is
percent.
the summary.
Yeah, 100%. And also too, I mean, it could be money, right? Like, maybe somebody says, I just want to make as much money as I possibly can. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So to figure out what positions are going to put you in place to do that, and if you look at, let's say, sales, if somebody says, I can be in sales, all right, and I want to make as much money as I possibly can. All right, well, when you're interviewing for jobs, what's going to help you get to that goal? And you might have, let's say, an entry level SDR, business development type of position, right? Or inside sales where you're doing kind of the grunt work of sales team. And you have another company that is offering you a field sales role where you're out, you're mixing with clients and you're doing this, and your commissions are better and you can make more money doing that rather than this inside sales role. But look at it as, well, what are you selling? This job that's offering you this field sales role that's going to pay you more, you're going to go there, you're going to do good. Are you going to be able to continue to grow, right? Because of what you're selling, and you're going to be able to continue to make more money and get more positions down the road, or what have you? Or does this job that is the inside sales role, does that give you a better chance of hitting your goal of making the most money possible? Because what you're going to get experience wise in the company and what they're selling and product, etc., that all those tools that you'll have in your tool belt when you're done that position is going to put you in a much better spot to achieve your goal than the other one. So if you have that in mind and you're finding a position, what's going to help you the most achieve those goals, that's really what to focus on.
It was a great podcast, Michael. Where can people find you apart from LinkedIn?
Where am I at? On LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. Other than that, you can find me on Instagram, but I don't really do much on there. But it's BRINNAAYY. And that's it. I'm not really on Twitter or anything. Just use LinkedIn. Not a huge social media guy. But yeah, I'm always happy to connect with people, and also too with career advice or flat out anything to do with hiring or recruiting. Maybe it's a recruiter that wants some advice. Maybe it's a candidate that wants some advice. People can always reach out to me. I'm more than happy. I volunteer for an organization called Hire Heroes, where I give some advice and some learning and training and help for military personnel when they're transitioning into civilian life with their career plans. So I'm always happy to talk with people.
Right, Michael. Thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for your time as well. And biggest of all, Thank you for sharing your advice on how a candidate should look for a job and how they should look for a career.
It was
Thank you
my
for being
pleasure.
on the
Yeah, it
podcast.
was my pleasure. I really appreciate you reaching out, and I appreciate you organizing this and hosting it. It was a good experience.
Thank you, Michael. We'll be ending the podcast now, and we will be soon publishing the podcast, and I will send you the links and everything updated on the LinkedIn as well.
All right, awesome.
Thank you.
You got it. Have a good one.
You too.